Hello, and welcome to the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. My name is David J. Mund. Winter is coming. I actually never saw Game of Thrones, so that quote doesn't mean a whole lot to me, but I figured I would say it because you look outside, I can tell that all of the leaves are finally starting to fall. We've had a beautiful fall here in northern Michigan. Well, hold on, I'm not in northern Michigan anymore. I grew up there, but it doesn't make sense to say northern Michigan. In West Michigan, it's beautiful. It's been a beautiful fall in Michigan, is what I'm trying to say. And despite my colorblind eyes, I can still see that the colors were pretty beautiful outside, even though they might not have been as well saturated or vibrant as they may have been to you. But seemingly overnight, all of those leaves are now falling off of the trees completely. Which means we know what's coming. The general election. Oh, boy. So before we get into that, I think it's important to mention that this is probably going to be a relatively shorter episode because holy shit, I've got a lot that I got to get done. And B, the main reason I'm doing this is because I felt like I was supposed to, not because I had too much to talk about. It's just been a couple of weeks. And again, before we get into that, huge thank you to the last episode's guests, Katie and Andrew of Cat and Crew. I'm sure you'll be hearing a little bit more about them in the middle of this episode here as the new ad read comes out. Very good friends of mine. They've supported this show from pretty much the beginning. With special deals and perks for ADH.Deep-Dive listeners. So more on that later. Just thank you. It was a good episode. Great turnout. Katie and Andrew have a pretty loyal fan base, pretty loyal following, and they have, I can tell from some of the analytics that those listeners went through and listened to previous episodes. So thank you. And if you're new here, boy, what a doozy we got coming up. Okay, this episode is going to drop Monday, November 4th, right? Monday, November 4th, which means tomorrow, November 5th, Tuesday, is Election Day. I have to imagine if you are not listening to this Monday as it comes out, then the election will have already happened. So pretty much everything I will have said in this episode by this point is a moot point. Oh, let's just watch Judah get into that bed. Get up there, Jude. Get up there. All right, I'm about to expose my ankles and my exposed knees in my gym shorts. Hang on a second, I have to put Judah into her bed. Come here. Come here. You lay in the bed? Get up there. Good girl. Good girl. Tell everybody you say hi. Yeah, good puppy. Okay. All right. A little bit of, pardon the office, by the way. It is a freaking mess. Man, as we'll talk about, I've had a lot going on, and maybe this is me finding excuses in real time, but I just haven't cleaned the office, haven't cleaned the house in quite some time. It's a bit of a pigsty. You know what else is a pigsty? The state of American democracy. I've told myself a handful of times that I have permission to talk about politics, but I'm sure that the general listening audience does not have the interest in hearing about my takes on politics. So I'm going to try and keep most of this sort of vague, nonpartisan, and whatever. But we've done an episode on the election chicanery before. Also, this episode isn't going to be all about the election. I have a few things that I want to talk about Midwest Skies related and future creative endeavors related. But come on, people. It's tomorrow. Election day is tomorrow. Anyways, the last time we talked about politics, and I think maybe one of the only times that we've really talked about politics or the election in general, was the day of or the day after Joe Biden dropped out of the race, which feels like 1 billion years ago and yesterday all at the same time. Holy shit, what is there even to say? So, this is not me using the bully pulpit of the A.D.H. Deep Dive to convince you to vote or who to vote for if you do. There is this overarching philosophy from many who say that if you don't vote, you can't complain. And I think that that is a load of bullshit. How many of those people also watch sports who complain but don't participate in the sport? How many times have you watched a football game where you've looked at the quarterback and you dumbass, you shouldn't have thrown it to him. He was interference. What? Well, go get out on the football field and play yourself. No, you don't want to do that? Well, then don't complain. No, you're going to complain. Because at this point, even though, yes, it has real world implications, similar to how one of the people running for president and our former president are reality TV show hosts, reality TV people. This whole thing is a fucking show. So let me address my bias first to new listeners who, again, I'm trying to come at this in a nonpartisan way, but it's more of an independence take on what's happening right now. If I vote, which I do believe I have every intention of doing, I will likely vote for Kamala Harris. I would not vote for Donald Trump. I would not vote third party, especially in the critical swing state of Michigan. I do have, if we're looking at this as being the lesser of two evils, I do believe that there is a lesser of two evils of which I have voted for every freaking time since I've been able to vote. My first vote was cast for Barack Obama in a presidential election. My second vote was cast for Hillary Clinton. My third vote was cast for Joe Biden. So technically, I have voted Democrat the last three general elections. But I'm not a Democrat. I feel like I had to register as a Democrat in order to participate in the primary process, of which in both primaries that I have voted in, which were the 2016 primaries and the 2020 primaries, I voted for Bernie Sanders, who is an independent who caucuses with the Democratic Party. Blah, blah, blah. Bernie Sanders got screwed. We know that. I know that. But then the last two times I've voted have been against Donald Trump, not for anybody in particular. And boy, howdy, I guess I'm prepared to do it again. However, I think it's also important to mention that the Democratic Party right now, their biggest message, not on taxes, not on healthcare, not even on abortion, not on ending the war in the Middle East, because they're actually perpetrating this war in the Middle East. It's not about that. Their primary message right now is democracy is on the ballot. This being the party that screwed Bernie twice, and I'm not here to get into a whole thing about it. If you don't believe they screwed Bernie, so be it. You have the right to believe that. Maybe we'll get into the specifics of it sometime about how I do believe that they screwed Bernie, but that's neither here nor there. That is the past. However, they knew, we knew, that Joe Biden was not the same Joe Biden from 2016 or even 2020 or even just 2 years ago. This was a different guy. And we found that out. The general public knew this, but this was confirmed to be the case. And that debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We beat Medicare. Yeah, we did, Joe. And again, as I'm about to riff on my take on how the Democratic Party has failed you and me, the Republican Party, in my opinion, is worse. Donald Trump is worse. Okay? There you go. I said it. All right? Don't shoot me. I said it. Donald Trump is worse. He is a threat to democracy. Blah, 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 blah. But the high horse, holier than thou take that the Democratic Party has is that you have to vote for us because we're going to save democracy. They knew that Joe Biden was a bad candidate in 2020. But they all rallied behind him so that Bernie Sanders, who was more likely to win in the general election, yes, Joe Biden won, but Bernie Sanders was leading by a wider margin in pre-election polls, would have won. It wouldn't have been close. Well, it would have been close, but it wouldn't have been razor thin. Anyways, but they didn't want Bernie Sanders in. A good portion of the American people did, but the Democratic Party didn't want Bernie Sanders in. I feel like I'm doing the thing that I said I wasn't going to do, and I'm just railing on the Bernie part of this, but it's not totally relevant. All that to say, that was phase one of this democracy nonsense, when it was clearly fake. They went with the guy who was losing to Donald Trump in the polls often. Obviously, he didn't lose in the final election. He ended up winning by 20,000 votes across a handful of swing states. But we knew he was a bad candidate to begin with. And then there was this stance that Joe Biden being elected president of the United States was a mandate against Donald Trump. And while it certainly was a mandate against Donald Trump and the way he led and the way he handled COVID, the guy still won, 75, 80 million votes? He gained more votes than any sitting president in United States history. And again, just to double down, I think the guy's a schmuck and he shouldn't be president. I think he's a bad guy. But a good portion of our American brothers and sisters disagree with us. Let's hit the extremes here, because we're going to get back to the democracy thing. Actually, no, let's just stick on the democracy thing. So, we're told that we can't have a primary process because there is a sitting Democratic president of the United States. And we don't primary incumbent presidents, especially if they have 4 more years to go or whatever. But in all the polls leading up to that debate, Donald Trump was destroying Joe Biden in the polls. And so they schedule this historically early debate. I think they usually the first debates are in September and October. The first general election presidential debates, Democrat versus Republican, they usually start in about September before the election. I think maybe before then there was some in August at the earliest. But June was when this thing was scheduled. Far enough before the election and the conventions that a new candidate could be picked, but by the time that the primary process was already over, the Democratic Party did not support a primary. Now, who would have won against Joe Biden? I don't know. I don't have a particular candidate in mind. And yes, there was I think his name's Dean Phillips, is a Democrat who ran to get votes, but there was no primary process. There was no primary debates. There was no media attention on Dean Phillips as a potential viable candidate because we've got a sitting president. So by this point, Joe Biden has gained technically enough delegates, but the Democratic convention has not happened yet. Then this debate happens, which shows us clearly that this guy is cooked. Oh, brother, this guy stinks. So just after that, now here's the conspiracy side. None of this has been publicly confirmed, but whatever, the news sources that I'm parroting here have said that after that debate, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, the leaders of the Democratic Party, threatened Joe Biden with the 25th Amendment, which means that his cabinet would have a vote of essentially no confidence, which ousts him as the president of the United States. This is for if a candidate or if a president has gotten us into a unsustainable war that threatens the American homeland and they feel like he's a madman. It could be for presidents who suddenly have dementia or whatever, are not in control of their faculties, and they, as the appointed cabinet, have decided this guy is not fit to serve anymore. So they said, Joe, we can do this the hard way or the easy way. The hard way being we 25th Amendment you. The easy way being you step out and you endorse Kamala Harris. Which he did. He stepped out. He endorsed Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, having garnered no votes in the primary process and having dropped out before Iowa, the first state to hold their primary or caucus in 2020, she dropped out because she didn't have any mainstream support. This person was anointed the new leader of the Democratic Party. Now, I understand the optics of passing over the first woman vice president, the first black vice president, the first black woman vice president, to maybe possibly insert white guy here. The optics of that are rough for a party that spent the last 8 years proudly wearing their progressive lapel, saying that we are the party of minorities and women and the forgotten demographic. There was no primary process in place, so nobody got a say. The American people didn't get a say in who the candidate would be after Joe Biden dropped out. They didn't get a say in the process to decide if Joe Biden was even the best person to run against Donald Trump again in the first place. There was these optics that Joe Biden was going to be a transitional candidate and that we already knew he was pretty old going into 2020, but it was like, okay, Joe, just beat the guy, get him out, spend 4 years doing whatever the hell you're going to do, and set up the party for a new generation to take over. But once somebody's in power, you're not getting them out willingly. They're going to be forced out, or they're going to spend their as much time as they can until the law demands that they are no longer president. President serves 2 terms, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, so now we're here in a race that anybody could have... Now, again, Kamala Harris is doing much better in the polls than Joe Biden. We went from having pretty much 90% certainty that Donald Trump was going to win to like a 50-50. And if you're in your own bubble and you think that it's way, way further apart than that, and you think that Kamala Harris is going to walk into November 5th and absolutely destroy Donald Trump in the polls, that is, I got a bridge to sell you. That is very likely not going to happen. Now, again, this episode comes out Monday. I am conjecturing right now about what will happen tomorrow. By the time this episode comes out, I could be proven so wrong. I am not a political analyst. I am a political observer with an American birthright, with an American citizenship. My read on this, however. Anyways, before we go on to my predictions here, just to put a little cherry on top of this, though, like all of that I just explained comes from the party that says, vote for us to save democracy. The party that said, fuck democracy, we do what we want, is now voting against a party that, yes, outwardly has a disdain for the democratic process. They're voting... I don't think I have many Republican listeners. I know that I have some listeners that will probably end up voting for Donald Trump, but I don't actually think that they're Republicans. I think the vote for Donald Trump is a fuck you to the establishment. Donald Trump is part of the establishment, in my opinion. He's a wealthy guy who's made donations to both sides of the aisle for decades and decades, and then literally became the president of the United States. The guy is a politician, despite what he says, and he's part of the establishment. It's just a different part of the establishment. Anyways, I don't know. I don't really have any interest in being like, here's some of the legitimate reasons that people would vote for Donald Trump. But I do also believe that you don't have to be a Nazi to vote for Donald Trump. It just so happens that Nazis are voting for Donald Trump. You're not a Nazi if you vote for Donald Trump, necessarily, unless you're a Nazi who's voting for Donald Trump. How's that, right? Okay. But there is a portion of the electorate that is voting for Donald Trump because they have been forgotten, let down, ignored, actively disdained by the left. And as a person who sees themselves as part of the left, but not part of the Democratic Party, we got a PR problem, guys. Like, you think we have this fantastic messaging. We don't. It's not winning. Telling someone, fuck you, you must do this, or you must believe this, you have to vote against this. If you vote for Donald Trump, you're a Nazi. You think they're going to want to believe you or change their mind? Like, there's a PR problem. And I'm not saying it's unique to the left, but it's ridiculous for you to believe that the left's message is palatable to a general audience when you try to cram it down their throat. Now, again, I'm probably partially guilty of this. Maybe some of this comes with like time and viewing enough elections go by where it's like, how the hell are Republicans winning? How are they gaining more votes? How is this happening over and over again? Maybe it's because we don't talk, right? We say, you're wrong, and if you don't believe me, fuck you. Both sides do it, but again, it's ridiculous to believe that the left doesn't do it too. So we got to figure this out, right? No matter who wins, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, we got to figure out how the hell we can live together because there's 350 million of us, and I know you're saying that I don't make compromises with Nazis. Well, guess what? You have to, because they live here too. And the only way that you can do anything about it is to either vote them out of office or literally revolt. If you want a revolution, brother, now's the time. And if you want that, if you think that you want that, boy, it's going to get ugly here. Bad, fast. We saw it on January 6th. We saw it during the riots in 2020. This place is a freaking tinderbox. And it's gonna explode if we don't figure this shit out. And I understand that tensions are high and literal basic human rights are on the line. I do believe that the Republican Party, the general right wing, is in the business of taking your rights away. Which again is why I will likely vote for Kamala Harris. But it's not just about who the president of the United States is. It's about your local city officials. It's about your state senate, your state house, federal levels of government, Congress, Senate. All of that matters. All of the down ballot stuff matters. And for you to only care about the president of the United States, the one person who's just kind of like the figurehead, yes, they have a lot of power. Maybe a scary amount of power for one person to have. They could literally press a button that destroys all of civilization with a nuclear weapon, with nuclear weapons. It's a lot of power, and it's really scary. But so many more elected officials matter more en masse. You turn, if you're a Democrat and you want to see change, Kamala Harris is not going to give you change. Changing your city and state officials changing the makeup of your local and state Congress matters more. Because they're the ones who actually write the legislation that a president signs. So if you want to see something done, give a shit about the down ballot races. But Donald Trump and Kamala Harris do not care about you. You actually have a say in who gets elected as a city official. It might even be somebody you know. And if you know that person, maybe they win. Maybe they run for a while, and then they go to your state Congress. And then if they're doing a great job there, maybe then they go to the federal level. And then they go for president. And then at that point, they've forgotten about you. They don't care about you. The president matters, but not nearly as much as you think. Okay. Let me clip, then we're going to predictions. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a punk house. It's a punk home. You can find this banner and others like it, as well as this silly goose on the loose hat, these etched mirrors, these custom charm bracelets, and so much more by heading to Cat and Crew, that's KATANDCREW.com, and entering the promo code Monday, that's MUNDAY, for 10% off your first purchase. Katie and Andrew, one of the first supporters of this show, have made a 10% discount available for ADH.Deep-Dive listeners. See store for details, of course, but they've got so many cool punk home products, decor. You don't have to be a punk. That's okay. That's all right. Tattoos for your home, koozies, wall banners. On its way, soon to be released, a hot sauce. Oh my God, keep your eyes peeled for that. So again, if you want this is not a punk house, this is a punk home banner. If you want this silly goose on a loose hat, if you want etched mirrors, if you want custom charm bracelets, so much more, go to Cat and Crew, KATANDCREW.com, enter the promo code Monday, that's MUNDAY, for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you very much to Katie and Andrew for sponsoring the show. Let's get back to the podcast. Okay, we're gonna quickly pitch this because I think my camera's gonna die here soon, and then whatever, that'll be the starting gun for the next phase of this as we get off of this election part. My prediction, as much as it stresses me out, this election is still going to come down to a handful of votes in a handful of swing states. We don't have time to get into the electoral college thing, but as I'm sure you know, the popular vote does not decide the president. The person who gets the most votes does not necessarily become president. What matters is the swing states. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, maybe Arizona? I could be wrong about that. Anyways, those swing states matter the most. And that's what can decide this election. I am now in a swing state. In just about every... Pennsylvania? Did I say Pennsylvania? Either way, in just about every single one of those swing states, it is more or less a 50-50 tie. You know, there's 48, and then Jill Stein gets 3% here. And if you don't know Jill Stein, she's the leader of the Green Party, who you don't hear anything about until the presidential elections because, whatever, we're not going to get into that. I believe in overturning the duopoly that is the two-party system, but nobody's really... I am not naive to believe that a single third-party candidate has a shot. Right now. Sorry. I want that to be the case, but it's just not. It's not. I got to be honest with you. I think that Donald Trump wins this election. I think there's a handful of reasons, even though I think that they're a bit silly. Knowing full well that Joe Biden inherited Donald Trump's economy, there's this whole narrative about how Donald Trump handed Joe Biden a booming economy with low inflation and blah, blah, blah. We were in the middle of a fucking pandemic. People were out of work, staying home, so gas was super low. Gas was super cheap, rather. The camera's going to die. 1 minute. Anyways, it is my opinion. And again, I'm not an economist. I don't even have $5 in my savings account. So don't take my financial advice. But the optics here are that Donald Trump handed Joe Biden a booming economy. Well, it's not exactly the case. There was always going to be inflation no matter who was president. Donald Trump, Joe Biden. Didn't matter. Because we spent a lot of money on bailing out the economy. Don't let anybody gaslight you into believing that it was the stimulus checks that doomed our economy. It was the 2008 bailing out of the banks that set up the 2020 bailing out of the oil and gas industries who were losing money because people weren't driving anymore. Again, bailing out the banks and wealthy corporations, of which the executives pocketed most of that stimulus money. Look it up, people. The little $600 stimulus check that you got did not destroy the economy. The small amount of employment or unemployment money that you got did not destroy the economy. It was the handouts to the billionaires and wealthy corporations. Okay? All right. However, Joe Biden became president during the inflationary period. Okay? Obviously, as you've seen, gas is starting to come back down. Cost of goods is starting to come back down. Housing prices are through the freaking roof right now, so good luck buying a house. Sorry about that. I don't really know what to tell you. Again, I'm not here to advocate for or defend the Democratic Party. They've got a lot of issues. I'm just saying that like gas prices weren't necessarily Democrats' faults, okay? However, that's going to be one of the main reasons that people vote against Joe Biden or against the Democratic Party is because the state of the economy for the last 4 years has been so tense that these last like 2 or 3 months where gas has been under $3, at least in Michigan, that's not enough. That's not enough. And guys, the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine. Donald Trump talks a big game about if I was president, this would have never happened. Okay, well, you weren't president. And if you were president, I still don't believe that would have been the case. But he gets to say that, right? It's an unknown, which leaves the possibility of truth. Maybe if he was president, it wouldn't have happened. And that's enough for some people to go, yeah, I think that's probably right. But what is a problem is that neither, and this is not to get involved in the semantics of the war in Gaza. I don't understand Middle East policy. All I know is that we've been bombing the shit out of them for 40 years, 50 years, maybe even more than that. And in the one period of time where we're not doing the bombing, we're actively supporting the bombing. Blah, 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 something, October 7th was a big deal, and Israel has the right to defend itself. That's true. But when do we start talking about genocide? When do we have an active conversation about how Israel can't be allowed to continue doing what they're doing? And if they want to do it, fine, do your thing, but not with our tax dollars, not with our weapons. There's these optics that if we stop supplying weapons to Israel, then, the Middle East will converge on itself and Israel will exist no longer. Guys, I don't think that's true. I don't know how to defend my point about how I think that's not true, but maybe that's for another time. That's not the point of this part. It's just a big reason why people, especially again in Michigan, where there's a large Arab American and Palestinian population, even though, let me be very clear here, I do believe Donald Trump would be much, much, much worse on this issue. He can say all he wants that, like, you have to find peace with strength. And if he was president, this would have never happened, and blah, blah, blah. He's also said that Joe Biden hasn't allowed Bibi Netanyahu to do enough, that he's stopped Benjamin Netanyahu from doing what needs to be done in order to solve this issue, which means Donald Trump would allow more bombing, would sell more weapons, and would probably get American troops involved in this issue. I do believe he would be worse on this issue. However, for people who don't know that, who don't believe that, who are relatively uninformed on the issue, as I am, let's be clear, it's the unknown. It's that maybe he might be better. I don't know. And that vagueness is enough for people to go, but what I do know is that the Democratic Party has allowed this to happen, and Kamala Harris doesn't seem like she has any intention of slowing this down, at least not publicly. She's not saying that publicly. Every single time she's asked about it, she says, well, what I do want to say is that October 7th was a tragedy. And actually, I think this is somewhere along the same quote. You can look it up. I'm pretty sure this is what she says. October 7th was a tragedy. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and Israel should be allowed to defend itself. But how they do so matters. And then she stops short of going pretty much any further than that. Anyways, this is enough for a large portion of the population to go, you know what? I know there's not going to be any change here. I might as well throw a Hail Mary and see if Donald Trump's any better on the issue. And I disagree with them, and I find it unlikely that he would be any better on the issue. I kind of believe that he would be significantly worse on the issue. But that's just me. I'm already voting for Kamala Harris at this point. Those who are yet to be convinced, that's why they're doing it. I think Kamala Harris loses on those two issues alone. And then there's all the stuff about the border, which I don't really understand. I don't think most people who talk about it, who claim to understand it, do understand it. But it's enough of a hot button issue that if you think you feel passionately about this, you're probably going to vote for Donald Trump. And look, do I hope I'm wrong? Sure. I do hope that Donald Trump is never allowed to be president of the United States again. However, I can't see how Kamala Harris is a good president. And let's say she wins, right? In 4 years, you're looking at a President J.D. Vance, especially if some of the hot button issues that are happening right now continue to be the case for 4 years. If the American people give Democrats a second chance here, it'll be so much worse in 2028. You will find a more capable, more competent, more organized, structured, disciplined Republican who demolishes, because it doesn't matter if a Bernie Sanders, even though I believe Bernie Sanders is too old at this point to run for president, in my opinion, whatever. But you get a Bernie Sanders light or a young Bernie Sanders, that type of person. It's not going to matter what they stand for because nobody's going to believe them. And there's these optics that, like, when Donald Trump was president, yes, a lot of horrific shit happened. And yes, a lot of the cultural conversation was about the way that he spoke and the manner in which he presented himself and how he represented America. But the country ticked left. The electorate ticked left. When Joe Biden was in office, a lot of the electorate ticked right. I think this is just what happens. And while I do recognize and I understand and I do not want Donald Trump to be president again, I have to imagine it will probably be the same case. That, like, we will unify in some capacity in the next 4 years to be like, well, where did we go wrong? And how do we stop this from happening again? Look, the American experiment has failed, in my opinion. Democracy, as it is presented, has fallen. Yes, I can go to the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread. Yes, I can put gas in my tank to get to the grocery store. But my vote right now doesn't really feel like it means a fucking thing. And I don't think Donald Trump or Kamala Harris are going to do anything about that. And I am more concerned about what 4 years from now looks like than I am about what, as of the release of this episode, tomorrow looks like. So on a bit of a bummer, I think I will say that I believe that Donald Trump wins tomorrow. I don't know what the House and Senate look like. I don't know where we go from there. But oh boy, even if he loses, it's going to get rough. Whatever, we can talk about January 6th or the peaceful transition of power. But at a bare minimum, you've got like 80 million people who are fucking furious right now. And they don't just go away or stay silent if Donald Trump loses. So, if you have a somewhat rational Republican in your life, or if you are a Republican that has a somewhat rational Democrat in your life, why don't you look at each other and go, these parties have failed us. These people have failed us. And try to figure out how we can work this thing out without them, because they do not care about you or me. Okay? All right? Okay. Oh, that's it for the election portion of this episode. Let me take a quick pee break. And then I'm going to try and maybe go for like 20 more minutes here, because there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about creatively that maybe I should have led with instead of like starting off with a big bummer. But I'll be right back. Okay, if you're just listening, I have my dog in my arms, so if you hear huffing and puffing, it's because she's huffing and puffing. Anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about Midwest Skies here, my band, in the hardest 180 possible. I've had a really good year with these guys. I think we're doing some really big stuff right now, and I think I've talked about this multiple times on the podcast. In fact, I know that I have. But this fall/winter schedule has been stacked. Since the beginning of October, we had 6 shows slated. I think probably maybe 1 or 2 more to announce, but it's pretty much locked where it's at. We've got 3 more shows right now. We've got the next show is in Cadillac at the Venue Event Center with Jesse Ray and the Carolina Catfish and Once Upon a Bison. Once Upon a Bison being recently voted as the #1 live music act / artist / band in Cadillac. And Cadillac's my hometown. And I'm really, really happy for them. I'm really proud of them. I'm really excited to see that. They're getting their flowers. Alex DeSico is likely to be the next guest on the podcast. If not the next guest, he's the guest right after. Because there's another big thing coming up that I'm so close to being able to talk about, but it still has to remain anonymous. Or I still have to be quiet about it right now. Anyways, so it'll be my first show back in my hometown in over 10 years. I have not played a show in Cadillac since I was in the band Live for Tomorrow, which was many, 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 many Davids ago. Anyways, so we've got that show. Then that's the day before Thanksgiving. Then we are playing in Bay City on November 30th, I believe, with Lemire and Doogie. And then we've got our Christmas show on December 14th. Sorry, let me put my dog down. Okay. It's been a really productive year, man. We released Peach Rings, which was a song that I've talked about many times on this podcast, which was a song. It was the first song that I was able to bring to Midwest Skies and be like, hey, I think we should do this. This should be a Midwest Skies song. Something that I wrote that, of course, Kyle and James helped bring to life in a way that I never could. And then we did the music video, which if you have not seen it, have not heard it, please do get those numbers up. Come on, man. I want to see Peach Rings thrive. But we've got new merch coming out in relation to Peach Rings. So keep an eye out for that, MidwestSkiesRock.com. But we also recently just did the first weekender, including the first out-of-state show that I've ever done with Midwest Skies. We just played down in Bowling Green, Ohio, after playing a show here in Grand Rapids. So we did a Friday night Mulligan's show, then Bowling Green, Ohio on Saturday. And both were really great crowds. I have some feelings about how our Friday night show went that I don't think are super relevant to talk about right now, but let's just say... never mind. Fuck it. Whatever. For all my feelings about Friday night that weren't 100% positive, but weren't 100% negative, Saturday night's show in Bowling Green made up for that. We opened up the show. We're the out-of-state, out-of-town band that nobody'd really heard of around there. And I don't know, when we open shows, it kind of means that we get to set the tone for the show. And I think we delivered on that. I don't think anybody really... Sometimes people don't expect much of the opening band because it's like whatever these people were billed first, I'm waiting for the headliner, so whatever, this opening band's not going to be very good, or at the very least, they're just not going to wow me. They're going to be great filler music. And we were very much more than that. I feel very proud of that. I don't really have much to say on that other than the fact that I'm very proud of what we're doing as Midwest Skies. I feel like there's a really deep sense of camaraderie right now, in a way that I feel was lacking since I joined the band. I feel like we're on a good page. And we got a lot of really cool shit to look forward to that I'm really proud of, really excited about, including these next 3 shows that I really do implore you to come to. Check out Peach Rings, check out the more recent music that we've put out. You can go into the history. You can look into the discography of Midwest Skies. Obviously, I'm biased in thinking that the most recent stuff we've put out is the best because the band's been around for 15 plus years and I've only been a part of it for 3. And, you know, if we're not doing better than we were before, then if the band's not doing better than it was before, then what's the point, right? Anyways, I think we're on to something big. Very proud of us. And I'm excited about what comes next. Now, I still can't talk about this. The next episode, you will likely hear me talk about it. I have the biggest creative gig of my entire career this Wednesday. So if you're listening to this episode, it has come out Monday, November 4th. Tomorrow is obviously election day. Then Wednesday, November 6th, I'm getting on a plane and heading to parts unknown for an anonymous gig that I cannot yet talk about. That once I talk about, you're going to go, what? He did what? With who? That guy? You're telling me you did this for that guy? And I'm going to go, yeah, I did. And you're going to say, prove it. And I'm going to say, okay, here's a picture of me with that guy. And you're going to go, what? That's Photoshop. And I'm going to go, nuh-uh. And then if I can't convince you from there, I understand. AI is taking over. It's getting harder and harder to believe what you see. But I promise you, I did it. And I can't believe that I did it because for the last couple of months, that's literally all I've been doing is preparing for this thing. So keep your eyes out for that because I can't wait to talk about that. If I don't talk about that by myself, it will likely be me talking about that with another person on this show. I think explaining anything further than that is spoilery and just speaking off the cuff a little too early in a way that I don't think either of us are ready for yet. But it's a big deal. And I know it's shitty to say, quote, big things are coming. Stay tuned. But big things are coming. Stay tuned. Okay. Friggin'. Oh, I'm done, man. I'm done. That was a doozy of a podcast. That whole election thing stirred me up. I probably should have led with all this creative stuff first so I could talk about it more in depth, but I don't think that I would have had the energy to bring it down. So if you stuck around till the end, thank you so much for listening to the ADH Deep Dive. Please, I'm begging you to go to catandcrew.com and enter the promo code Monday. That's MUNDAY for 10% off your first purchase. They've got a bunch of cool new stuff in there that I'm really hyped for them about. And the fact that they offer this discount to ADH-Deep-Dive listeners is huge. If it makes me feel special, it should make you feel special. Get something for yourself. Get something for a loved one. I'm sure I've already talked about it on the podcast. I'm doing the Donald Trump thing with my hands, which I assure you there's no problem there. Okay. What else we got, right? That's it, huh? Okay, go to MidwestGuysRock.com. Check out dates for the shows. Get some new merch. Stream Peach-Rings on Spotify or wherever you listen to music. Catandcrew.com, enter the promo code Monday, MUNDAY for 10% off your first purchase. And buckle up, because I might be wrong on my predictions about who wins, but I have to imagine that no matter who wins, it's going to get tense up in this bitch. This bitch being these great United States. Okay. All right. I don't think I'm doing an episode next week because I'll be out doing the thing I told you I was out doing that I can't talk about yet. I have to imagine there will probably be an episode right after that, though, because I'm going to promote this Cadillac show that I hope is a freaking sellout show. And then I'm going to talk about the thing that I went and did in parts unknown. Okay? All right. What a doozy of an episode. I'm trying to think of anything else I should probably talk about. That's it. I give up. I'm burned out. I love you guys. Thank you for listening. This was the ADH Deep Dive with David J. Mund, the show that's not about ADHD, but it's filled with proof it exists. I did that all wrong, but I love you. And goodbye.